Greetings and welcome to the L.E.A.P Lifestyle Podcast. I'm going to be your host, Christopher White. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today on this amazing day. A little rainy here in Syracuse, New York, but it's a beautiful day to be after it, be doing the things that I like to do. This podcast is brought to you by the People's Community Development Corporation. It is this corporation that allows me the latitude to be able to bring forth some of the ideas and thoughts and things that I share with you all. So I'm deeply appreciative of the People's Community Development Foundation Corporation, and I just appreciate all that they make happen for me. All right, now on today's show, I have something really interesting that I want to share with you all. I got a text this morning from a very good friend of mine. And the text was about, he asked me some questions about like our thought process and like self-defeating behaviors and things along this line. So when he says to me, he asked me the question and I'm like, I read the text and I say to myself, this text deserves more than me just reading it, right? So I'm going to pull a text up for you guys just to read it to you because I just want you to hear what he was thinking this morning. And then, we can kind of just go from there. I got a little video on self-defeating behaviors and things of that nature that I absolutely want to share with you all today because it's like, this is something that I think that a lot of us struggle with, and a lot of people don't talk about it. And maybe they don't even know the reason why we do the things we do. But this was what it says. This is the question that he asked. He says to me, what is the science behind thoughts of reinforced failure, slowing down or hindering our thought process for success? And how is that reinforced within the Black community? And how do we recognize and combat that thought process? Now, I don't know what kind of text messages you guys get in the morning first thing, but that's the text message that I got from a really good friend of mine first thing this morning. So that allows you to kind of understand some of the dialogue that we have on a day-to-day basis and just, where we wake up and where our minds may be. So let me just dive right into it, right? Like, what are my thoughts on self-defeating thoughts and how do we overcome that and how do we combat that? So I went through, I watched a bunch of different videos on YouTube about self-defeating thoughts and how to overcome them and all of these kinds of things. And then I started thinking, well, how does it look in my life? How have my self-defeating thoughts actually become behaviors, right? And then they actually become actions. And then I find myself in a situation. Right. So like now as I was talking to my friend this morning, he was sharing some really deep information about himself and his situation as to why he was thinking this way. And sure enough, it was a situation where, someone came to him and they were saying like, yo, like, I'm ready to give it up. I'm ready to no longer be here with you, with anyone. Right. And, like that's the kind of space that we can find ourselves in when we're not doing work, when we're not trying to be better or do better. But it's a bigger piece to that picture, right? Like, it's not as simple as, oh, we just going to wake up and we're going to be praying every day and then that's it. That's the end of the situation. It doesn't normally go like that. It's usually some activating events that occur, early on in life, most of the time, for most of us, for myself, right? And messages that we receive throughout life, right? Like messages telling us that we're not good enough, that we're not worthy, that we're not valuable, that we're nothing, right? Like that's what the world would have you to believe as a person who is Black or brown, right? Or other than, I would say non-white. That's what I would say, right? Like the world shows other people, brown people, Black people, they show them in a disfavorable light. But that's not the reason why I want to harp on all of this. It's not like a black and white thing. To some degree it is, right? But that's not my main message for today. My main message for today is just like beginning to understand and identify what some of the challenges that we're facing really are, right? Like, where does this stuff stem from? Why is it that like every time I get in position to be able to do something really good or something favorable in my life that I make a bad decision right at that moment, prior to that moment? Right? I'll give you a prime example of a situation that I went through in my life. I'm on the verge of making a transition in a job, right? Making a transition in a job to being paid an amount of money that I've never imagined that I could possibly make, right? And on the verge of me getting ready to get this promotion, if you will, what do? I throw a brick right through the building, basically, hypothetically speaking. But, I acted out in a way in which that I could no longer even be offered the position, let alone keep the current position, because I displayed a level and a lack of aptitude emotionally to be able to say, you know what, this situation doesn't warrant the response that I'm thinking about giving. Right. In proportion, right? Like things happening in proportion. Why do I always have to go beyond proportion, right? Like, a prime example of that is smashing an ant with a sledgehammer. Why is that necessary, Chris? And so I say all of that to say, like, those are some of the struggles that, I've personally gone through with self-defeating thoughts, self-defeating behaviors. And so I came across this lady. I want to let her speak because it's about 10 to 12 minutes long. And I want to hear some of what she has to say, and then hear some of you guys' thoughts on what some of your self-defeating thoughts or some of the challenges that you've come across where you feel like, yo, I want to do something different because I don't like the responses I'm getting. So I'm going to cue the video, and it's an amazing video to me. It's a really good video, right? And it allows us to begin to start thinking about things, right? To start thinking about why we find ourselves in the situations we find ourselves in. So I'm going to let it run, and I'll be, pausing here and there, sharing a couple of thoughts here and there, and then, we'll just go. All right, so here we go.
The vicious circle of childhood trauma works like this. Bad things happened to you when you were a kid and caused X amount of damage to your emotions, your health, your ability to perceive who is a safe person, to your confidence, to get away from people who don't have your best interest at heart. And then those wounds turn into new traumas in your life in the form of self-defeating behaviors. And these are patterns every traumatized person develops unless they get interrupted or healed, and they can go on and on and on. And in my life, I'd say 20% of the trauma that I've carried was stuff that happened to me as a kid. And 80% of my trauma is the result of trauma-driven decisions and patterns in my behavior. So there's trauma from the outside of myself and trauma from the inside of myself. And when they're happening, it feels like I have no control over them at all. Do you have this? You definitely don't have control over what was done to you in the past, but as much as it feels like a mystery, like the same bad things keep happening in your adult life for no reason at all, it seems like, you can trace adult traumas oftentimes to decisions you made or boundaries you weren't able to set. And so even though those glitches are probably trauma-driven, there actually is hope that you can notice where you're slipping into self-defeating behaviors and begin to change. Nobody talks about this enough. When we talk about trauma, we talk about what was done to us. But the part we keep doing to ourselves is just as important, because this is what we have the power to change. Very little healing is possible until the self-defeating behaviors have been stopped, or at least the major ones. And if they're not, they can absolutely ruin your life.
Right.
Thankfully, there are ways to stop re-traumatizing yourself like this, to heal from the past and start living your present day life in a way that's positive, self-loving, constructive, and just not traumatic. And it's a life where you're happy and where you're safe and you're loved. So in my courses and coaching programs, I teach people how to heal from the effects of childhood PTSD, how to make changes step by step, from brain healing to emotional healing to healing the ability to connect with other people. And then on the way to the really advanced levels is this: identifying and changing your self-defeating behaviors.
Right.
Now, this is the hardest thing to face. People who aren't ready to heal aren't ready to do this.
It can be difficult.
To acknowledge that today, a lot of what's hurting you and holding you back, it's not your parents, not anymore, but it's your own behavior. I know, right? I learned this the hard way, believe me. It's not your fault that you were hurt like this, but now every bit of your courage is going to be needed, because there are things that only you can change. Self-defeating behaviors are those things. Are you able to let this in? The horrible irony of surviving abuse and neglect in childhood is that the more you were hurt back then, the more likely you are to adopt these self-defeating behaviors that make the effects of the original trauma even worse. These are things like the people you allow into your life, the way you take care of yourself, the choices you make about partners and jobs and money and where you live, the people you admire, the things you say, and of course, the way you act. It's easy to spot this tendency in other people, but sometimes it's really hard to see it in ourselves. We go into denial, we defend what we're doing as necessary so that we can feel okay. But it doesn't actually make things better. You can turn around self-defeating behaviors into a positive progression, and you can make the trauma stop. Okay, so let's look at these traumas. Number one is neglect of your body, and this includes having clothes that are not appropriate or really shabby. Like, look in your drawers. What's going on in there? Do you have poor hygiene? Do you floss? Do you neglect physical exercise? Are you staying current on medical and dental care? Do you self-harm? Okay. Number two is blame. And blame could be like difficulty seeing your own role in problems. It could be victim thinking, bitterness, slandering others, like talking about them all the time to others, having the belief that all the problems that you have are the result of the country you're in, or racism, or sexism, or foreigners, or a political party, or religion, or lack of religion, or certain foods, your parents. Just, the belief that all your problems are from this like outside thing. That is not actually realistic. Number three, self-defeating behavior is black and white thinking. It's really common for people with CPTSD. And what you see is that people like us are really drawn to extreme views. We're drawn to extreme groups and authority figures and even cults. We're into belief systems. And we are more likely than other people to get outraged at the news. Like, there's something about that is very emotionally dysregulating, and whoosh, we lose our freedom to disagree because we can't step back from conflict, and we are drawn either to being dominated or to dominating other people, cutting them off, going no contact with friends rather than talking things out. Okay. Number four is numbing with substances. We are prone to try to relieve stress with alcohol and drugs, or taking more medication than we should, or one that's actually not prescribed to us. That's kind of a trauma-driven behavior and a self-defeating behavior. And I will talk about food and media in terms of addictions too. Addictive use of food, carb binging, unhealthy weight, eating disorders, obsession with eating correctly, which is called orthorexia, by the way. And then another one, addictive use of media. Do you play video games? Do you watch TV all the time? Are you always on the internet? Is it bad enough that it's interfering with your sleep or your meals or your daily routine or your responsibilities at work or with your family? That's an addiction. Okay. Another one, dishonesty. And this includes not just lies, but like exaggerating, hiding important personal truths or preferences about yourself, stealing, being unfaithful, and even things that some people consider ordinary, like tax evasion or illegal activity. All right, another self-defeating behavior, work problems. And this includes like chronic adversarial relationships with your boss, with your coworkers, doing unfulfilling work, under-earning. That's a huge problem for people with CPTSD. Neglect of the learning that you need and the skill development that you need to, continue in your job, suing people, getting sued, that kind of thing. All right, another self-defeating behavior, irritability, and I use this very generally, and that means like having frequent arguments with people, falling out with friends and neighbors and partners, not having good relationships with your family because of you, ranting, rage, mistreating other people, seeking revenge on people, getting violent, right? Or I want to add this, being hostile on social media, including YouTube. All right. Attraction to troubled partners and friends. I think this is one of the hugest self-defeating behaviors, and this is the one that really pushes it into the next generation. This is a very powerful self-defeating behavior. It's an important one to prioritize if this is a problem for you. And this would be if you're repeatedly drawn into relationships that turn out to be abusive, controlling, damaging to other relationships, damaging to your family, damaging to your finances. If you're claiming other people are abusive or narcissistic, but staying in those relationships, you're doing that self-defeating behavior, all right? Rationalizing why staying is necessary is one of the signs. Having an unfulfilling romantic life or no dating relationship or staying in bad relationships is another self-defeating behavior. Maybe you're creating or staying in sexless or loveless partnerships, okay? Here's another one, abuse of your sexuality. Having an overly sexualized appearance, overly sexualized conduct, losing your dignity around sex, losing your emotional security or the ability to be real around sex and relationship dynamics, doing things that you don't want to do or that make you feel ashamed, unwanted pregnancy or compulsive behavior around sex. And this would include things like the use of porn. Another self-defeating behavior is fantasy, and this would include romantic and financial. And that is a flight from reality when things are tough, not really being here, not in touch with reality, and failing to take responsibility and responsible action, and having huge unrealistic expectations and promises and inflating the importance of relationships or events or the future or personal attributes or your prospects. So it's all fantasy. All this energy is going into this picture, but not really into the real life steps involved in getting there. At the far end of this self-defeating behavior is like obsession and stalking. And even before it gets that far, you'll start to see signs that you neglect your health, you neglect your work, you neglect your family, you're starting to avoid people. All right. Avoiding people is a self-defeating behavior in its own right. And this is like avoiding responsibility, avoiding participation, isolating, being a social anorectic, if you know that word, social, sexual, emotional anorexia. You can sometimes do this as even when you're in a couple, like couples will become socially anorectic, or groups will. They just don't deal with anything else. Okay. Here's another one, debting. Debting is when you live beyond your means to pay for your home, your car, your therapy, whatever it is. The growth of debt, gambling, foreclosure, bankruptcy, homelessness, having a vague sense of the path towards becoming solvent. That's what it looks like. Now, I allow that, of course, financial difficulties could happen to anybody, but when I'm talking about the self-defeating behavior, it's like continuing to make the choices that push you there when there really is an alternative, which is basically spending more than you have. Another self-defeating behavior is repeating traumatic patterns, seemingly being unable to detect trouble ahead or to step back when trouble appears, just like marching right into it. You relapse into a traumatized state, triggering or deepening the depression, the rage, the feeling of collapse that's been going on with you in the past with your traumas, and then you fall back into old behaviors. And that's another one. I know how hard it is to stay out of that. It can feel like it's just happening to you.
Okay. And so I mean, I know there's a lot there to unpack, right? Like she said a lot, she talked about a lot of different things, but one of the things that I wanted to highlight was the selecting our partners, the people we choose to be in intimate relations with, and basically ultimately the people we choose to like allow into our sphere, and how much their energy contributes to what it is with us. And then the part that really drew me in was when she said, this is how it becomes a cycle when you have two people from traumatic experiences together, unhealthy, bringing a new person into the world, and then pushing all of those traumatic experiences, that traumatic experience perspective, if you will, onto their child. And that's how we put our fears into our kids, whether we do it consciously, subconsciously, but we do that. And it's a lot deeper than that. But I just wanted to get that out there for you guys today. And again, this is just something to begin to better understand ourselves and to better understand how we can be better. So, with all of that said, I'd like to thank all of you guys for your time today for this little 20 minutes. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I would appreciate it if you leave some comments. Let me know what you're thinking, what more you would like to hear. And if you got any input on this particular conversation, just share it. And again, thank you. Thank you to the People's Community Development Corporation for all that they do and supporting me and supporting the L.E.A.P Lifestyle Podcast. We'd like to thank them. Again, stay safe, stay real, and you are kings and queens, and just keep doing your thing. Peace. Peace and blessings to everyone out there, and have an amazing day. Chris White signing out. Peace.